Ah, the illustrious Galactic Academy of Sciences and Arts, where the brightest minds from across the cosmos congregate to further their education and understanding of the universe. It's a place where species from all walks of life come together in the pursuit of knowledge, cultural exchange, and, well, let's be honest, to engage in the time-honored tradition of procrastination and last-minute cramming. Now picture this, it's just another ordinary day at the academy. The suns are shining, the anti-gravity fields are humming, and the cafeteria is serving its usual array of questionably edible substances that somehow pass for universal cuisine. But little did anyone know that today would go down in the annals of academy history as the day a Deathworlder shocked the entire school. And by shocked, I mean left everyone's tentacles quivering, antennae twitching, and various other alien appendages doing whatever it is they do when utterly flabbergasted. Our story begins in Professor Zilblax's Xenobiology 101 class. Now Zilblax was your typical Venurian academic, all 12 eyes, no personality. He had a voice that could put a Hypnolian dream eater into a coma, and a teaching style that made watching paint dry seem like an extreme sport. On this fateful day, Zilblax was droning on about the fascinating subject of survival adaptations in low-gravity environments. The class was a mixed bag of species, from the floaty gaseous entities of Nebula IX to the gelatinous blob beings of Squish Prime. And then there was Jake, our resident human and Deathworlder extraordinaire. Jake sat at the back of the class, his feet propped up on the desk in a pose that screamed, "I'm too cool for school," which, let's face it, is a universal constant across all sentient species. Yes. He was idly spinning a pen between his fingers, a trick that never failed to mesmerize his alien classmates. To them, it was like watching a magic show. To Jake, it was just another way to stay awake during Zilblax's monotonous lectures. And so, class, Zilblax drawled, his voice a perfect imitation of a malfunctioning robot. We see that species from low-gravity worlds have developed elongated limbs and reduced bone density too. Snap! The sound cut through the classroom like a plasma cutter through butter. All eyes, stalks, and sensory organs swiveled towards the source, Jake. To there he sat, cool as a cucumber, a earth vegetable that had become inexplicably popular among the alien student body, looking down at his hand. And it was half of the pen he had been twirling. The other half lay on his desk, cleanly snapped in two. For a moment there was silence. Then, like a wave of pure chaos, the classroom erupted. "By the gaseous clouds of Xenon 7, shrieked a nebulite, its wispy form pulsating in shock. "He's broken a writing implement with his bare manipulators." A squeaking oozed off its chair in a dead faint, forming a puddle on the floor that other students had to be careful not to step in. Professor Zilblax's 12 angst in rapid succession, a rare display of emotion for the usually stoic Venurian. "Mr. Jake," he said, his voice quavering slightly, "would you care to explain your actions?" Jake looked up, a mix of amusement and confusion on his face. Sorry, Prof. Guess I don't know my own strength sometimes." He shrugged, a gesture that sent ripples of fear through the class. Who knew what other sudden movements this Deathworlder was capable of? A Tritonian in the front row, whose species communicated through bioluminescent flashes, was blinking so rapidly it looked like a malfunctioning strobe light. Its friend, a translator bot, sparked to life. Query: was this a display of Deathworlder aggression? Follow-up query: are we all going to die? Jake couldn't help but laugh, a sound that was equal parts menacing and melodious to his alien classmates. "Relax, guys. It's just a pen. They're made to be disposable back on Earth." This statement, meant to be reassuring, only served to heighten the panic. "Disposable weapons?" squeaked a rodentian, its whiskers twitching in terror. "What kind of hellscape is this Earth?" Professor Zilblax, sensing he was rapidly losing control of the situation, attempted to regain some semblance of order. "Now, class, let's not jump to conclusions. I'm sure Mr. Jake didn't mean to." But it was too late. The floodgates of curiosity and terror had been opened, and questions began pouring in faster than a Qualaxian quantum computer could process them. "Is it true that humans drink liquid poison for fun? I heard they voluntarily expose themselves to radiation just to change the color of their exoskeletons. Someone told me they regularly hurl themselves off high places attached only to a piece of fabric." Jake, for his part, was trying his best not to burst into laughter. He held up his hands in a placating gesture, which only served to make several students flinch. "Hua, one at a time. Yes, we drink coffee. No, it's not poison. Well, not usually. Tanning isn't radiation, okay, maybe it is, but it's mostly harmless. And skydiving is perfectly safe, most of the time. A Gravitonian, whose species evolved in a high-gravity environment and thus appeared as a compact, dense ball of muscle, spoke up. But why would you engage in such dangerous activities? What purpose does it serve? Jake grinned, an expression that showcased his alarmingly sharp teeth. For fun, of course. The class collectively gasped. Fun? The concept that one would willingly endanger oneself for fun was so alien to most of the students that several of them began to question their decision to enroll in a school that accepted Deathworlders. Professor Zilblax, seeing an opportunity to salvage his lesson, cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat in Venurian anatomy. Well, class, it seems we have stumbled upon an excellent real-world example of extreme environmental adaptations. Mr. Jake, would you care to elaborate on how your species has evolved to survive such interesting pastimes? Jake, never one to shy away from the spotlight, stood up. This simple action caused several students to instinctively activate their personal force fields. Sure thing, Prof. Well, you see, Earth is what you guys call a death world, but for us, it's just home. We've evolved to be tough, adaptable, and maybe a little crazy by your standards. He began pacing back and forth at the front of the class, his movements reminiscent of a predator stalking its prey. The students watched, equal parts terrified and fascinated. Take our skeletal structure, for instance. Jake continued, warming to his subject. We've got dense bones that can withstand high impacts. Comes in handy when you're playing sports like football or hockey, games where the objective is basically to slam into each other at high speeds. A collective shudder ran through the class at the thought of voluntarily colliding with another being for entertainment. Then there's our cardiovascular system, Jake went on, tapping his chest. Highly efficient, able to keep us going under extreme stress. We can run for hours, push our bodies to the limit, and then do it all again the next day. A chlorophyllon raised a leafy appendage. But why would you need to run for hours? What could possibly be chasing you for that long? Jake chuckled. Nothing's chasing us. We do it for fun, remember? Marathons, triathlons, ultra-endurance races. We've turned our survival adaptations into sports. The concept of turning survival into a recreational activity was so mind-boggling that several students' universal translators short-circuited, leaving them in a state of confused silence. Oh, and let's not forget our digestive system, Jake added with a mischievous glint in his eye. We can eat almost anything. In fact, some of our favorite foods are technically poisons to other species. Take capsaicin, for example, the compound that makes peppers spicy. It's a defense mechanism for the plant, but we humans, we can't get enough of it. We even have competitions to see who can eat the spiciest foods. At this point, a gaseous stinted student had to excuse itself, its vaporous form turning a sickly green at the thought of willingly ingesting poison for pleasure. Professor Zilblax, who had been furiously taking notes, interjected. Fascinating, Mr. Jake, but surely these adaptations come with drawbacks. No species can be this resilient without some cost. Jake nodded, his expression turning somewhat serious. You're right, Prof. We're not invincible. Our high-energy lifestyles mean we need a lot of sleep. Most humans spend about a third of their lives unconscious. This revelation caused a stir among the students. The idea of being vulnerable and unaware for such a large portion of one's life was terrifying to many species that required minimal rest. Plus, Jake continued, our emotions can be pretty intense. We feel things deeply: love, hate, joy, sorrow. It can lead to some pretty spectacular achievements, but also some pretty spectacular mistakes. A logician, a species known for their cold rationality, spoke up. Illogical. Strong emotions and evolutionary disadvantage. They cloud judgment and lead to suboptimal decision-making. Jake smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Maybe, but they're also what drive us to explore, to create, to push boundaries. Our emotions are what make us human. The class fell silent, each student contemplating the strange, terrifying, yet somehow admirable species. Professor Zilblax, sensing a teachable moment, addressed the class. Students, what we're witnessing here is a prime example of divergent evolution. The harsh conditions of Earth have produced a species that is, by our standards, extraordinarily resilient and adaptable. But as Mr. Jake has pointed out, these adaptations come with their own challenges. Jake, deciding to really drive the point home, suddenly clapped his hands together loudly. The sound, like a thunderclap in the quiet classroom, caused a chain reaction of panic. Gelatinous students liquefied, anti-gravity units misfired, sending several floating species to the ceiling, and a chorus of alarm calls in various pitches and frequencies filled the air. Oops, Jake said, trying to suppress a grin. My bad. Guess I don't know my own strength, huh? Professor Zilblax, his 12 eyes narrowed in what might have been annoyance. It was hard to tell with Venurians, spoke up. Yes, thank you for that vivid demonstration, Mr. Jake. Now, if we could all calm down and return to our seats. Yes, That includes those of you currently adhered to the ceiling. We can continue our discussion on adaptive traits. As the class slowly returned to order, with more than a few wary glances thrown in Jake's direction, the human leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk on his face. He had certainly made Xenobiology class more interesting today, but the excitement wasn't over yet. Oh no, dear readers, for you see, news of the Deathworld incident spread through the Galactic Academy faster than a quantum entanglement gossip network, which, coincidentally, was the subject of study in the Advanced Communications Department. By lunchtime, the cafeteria was abuzz with rumors and speculation. Jake found himself at the center of attention as he navigated the lunch line, his tray piled high with a variety of foods that would have made a Xenobiologist said spin. "Is it true you can regrow lost limbs?" a wide-eyed salamandran asked as Jake passed by. Jake chuckled. "Nah, that's not us. You're thinking of Axolotls, Earth amphibians. Cool critters, but definitely not human. I heard humans can survive in the vacuum of space without protection," chirped an avian species whose name Jake could never pronounce correctly. "For a very, very short time, maybe," Jake replied, taking a bite of his sandwich. "But trust me, it's not a recommended experience." As he made his way to a table, he overheard snippets of conversations from all around. "They say humans can bend metal with their bare hands. I heard they can see in complete darkness. Someone told me they can communicate telepathically." Jake couldn't help but shake his head in amusement. The rumor mill was working overtime, it seemed. He sat down at a table, and to his surprise, instead of the usual wide berth his alien classmates gave him, several brave or foolhardy souls actually joined him. A sylphid, a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid force field, spoke up. "Jake, is it true that humans intentionally ingest mind-altering substances for recreational purposes?" Jake nearly choked on his drink. After composing himself, he replied with a grin, "Well, some do. It's called partying. But I wouldn't recommend it, especially not with the way some of you guys react to simple sugar." This led to a whole new round of questions about human biochemistry and the effects of various substances on their physiology. Jake found himself giving an impromptu lecture on the history of human intoxicants, from ancient fermented beverages to modern synthetic drugs. "But why?" asked a perplexed crystalline being, its faceted body reflecting the cafeteria lights in a dazzling display. "What evolutionary advantage does this provide?" Jake leaned back in his chair, balancing it on two legs, an act that caused several nearby students to gasp in fear for his safety. "Honestly, none. It's just something we do for fun, to relax, to socialize. Not everything has to have an evolutionary purpose, you know." This concept seemed to short-circuit several of the more logic-oriented species at the table. The idea of doing something potentially harmful purely for enjoyment was so foreign to them that they sat in stunned silence for several moments. Taking advantage of the lull in conversation, Jake decided to have a little fun. He pulled out a small red fruit from his lunch bag, a chili pepper he had been saving for a special occasion. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he popped the whole thing into his mouth and began to chew. The reaction was immediate. The aliens at the table recoiled in horror as they recognized the fruit, a notorious earth plant known for its extreme capsaicin content. They had studied it in Xenobotany class as an example of plant chemical defenses. "By the cosmic winds," exclaimed a Gosbag from Neptulon IV, its translucent body turning a sickly shade of green. "He's ingesting pure poison." Jake's face turned red, sweat beaded on his forehead, and his eyes watered. But he continued chewing with a grin that can only be described as maniacal. Spicy," he managed to say between bites, his voice slightly strained. The cafeteria erupted into chaos. Some students fled in terror, convinced they were witnessing a suicide attempt. Others called for the medical droids, sure that Jake would keel over at any moment. A few of the more scientifically minded ones started taking readings with their personal scanners, eager to document this bizarre human behavior. As the pandemonium unfolded around him, Jake calmly finished his pepper, took a swig of milk, another substance that fascinated his alien classmates. "You drink the infant nourishing secretions of other species," and wiped his mouth. "Whew. That had a nice kick to it," he said, his voice slightly hoarse but otherwise unaffected. A stunned silence fell over the cafeteria. Jake looked around at the sea of shocked faces and other alien approximations of shock, and couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Oh man, you should see your faces," he chortled. "Guys, it's just a pepper. Spicy, sure, but not deadly, at least not to humans." A brave molluscoid slithered forward, its eye stalks quivering with a mix of fear and curiosity. But why? Why would you willingly subject yourself to such discomfort?" Jake shrugged, a gesture that never failed to fascinate his alien classmates with its casual dismissiveness. "For the flavor, for the endorphin rush, for the challenge, and okay, maybe a little bit to see your reactions. This explanation did little to quell the confusion and concern of Jake's alien classmates. If anything, it only raised more questions. Endorphin rush. Queried a neuronite, its synapses visibly firing in rapid succession. You mean your brain rewards you for ingesting harmful substances? Jake nodded, still grinning despite the lingering burn in his mouth. Yep, it's not just peppers either. We humans have all sorts of ways to get our kicks. Roller coasters, horror movies, extreme sports, we love a good adrenaline rush. A Saphirian, whose species was known for their extreme risk aversion, looked like it was about to faint. But that's so dangerous. How has your species not gone extinct? Jake laughed, a sound that was still unsettling to many of his classmates. Oh, we've come close a few times. But that's the thing about humans, we're survivors. The more challenges we face, the more we adapt and overcome. As the excitement in the cafeteria began to die down, Jake found himself surrounded by a growing crowd of curious aliens. It seemed his pepper-eating stunt had broken down some barriers, and now everyone wanted to know more about these crazy Deathworlders. Is it true humans can survive losing large quantities of their vital fluids? Asked a herbivore, its feeding tentacles twitching with interest. You mean blood? Yeah, we can lose quite a bit and still pull through, Jake replied. We've even turned it into a way to help each other. It's called blood donation. This revelation caused another stir among the assembled aliens. The idea of voluntarily giving up one's vital fluids to help others was simultaneously horrifying and fascinating to many of them. A photosyntheon raised a leaf-like appendage. I've heard that humans deliberately deprive themselves of solar energy for extended periods. Is this true? Jake took a moment to decipher this question. Oh, you mean we sleep at night? Yeah, most of us do. Our bodies need time to rest and repair. But what about predators? The photosyntheon pressed, its chloroplast darkening with concern. Jake chuckled. Well, that used to be a big problem back in our caveman days. But now we've got these things called houses. They keep us safe while we sleep most of the time. The caveat at the end of his statement did little to reassure his alien audience, many of whom were now eyeing the exits nervously. A Gravitonian, still looking skeptical, spoke up. Earlier, you mentioned that humans engage in activities where they collide with each other for entertainment. Surely this is an exaggeration. Jake's eyes lit up. Oh man, where do I even start? Football, rugby, hockey, boxing. We've got tons of contact sports. Here, let me show you. Before anyone could stop him, Jake pulled out his personal comm device, a piece of technology that was positively archaic by Galactic standards, but which Jake insisted had retro charm. He quickly pulled up a video of a particularly brutal football tackle. The reaction was immediate and intense. Several students recoiled in horror, while others leaned in, morbidly fascinated. A gelatine from Blob Prime actually liquefied in shock, forming a puddle on the cafeteria floor. This is barbaric, exclaimed a Pacifican, a member of a species known for their strict nonviolence policies. How can you call this entertainment? Jake shrugged, still grinning. What can I say? We humans like a bit of rough and tumble. It's not just about the violence, though. It's about skill, strategy, teamwork, and yeah. Okay, maybe a little bit about seeing who's the boss. As the aliens continued to gawk at the football footage, a thought occurred to Jake. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he said, You know, if you think this is intense, wait till you see what we do for fun off the field. The cafeteria fell silent, all eyes and various other sensory organs fixed on Jake in terrified anticipation. Ever heard of skydiving? And with that simple question, Jake launched into a description of various extreme sports popular on Earth. He told them about bungee jumping. You throw yourself off high places attached to an elastic cord. Free solo climbing, scaling sheer cliff faces without any safety equipment. And wingsuit flying, gliding through the air at insane speeds with nothing but a special suit. With each new activity Jake described, the reactions of his alien classmates grew more incredulous. Some were listening with a mix of horror and fascination, while others seemed to be reevaluating their decision to attend a school that accepted Deathworlders. Issa, a logician, its metallic skin reflecting the cafeteria lights, spoke up. This behavior defies all rational analysis. What possible benefit could be derived from such reckless endangerment? Jake leaned back in his chair, balancing it on two legs, an action that caused several nearby aliens to flinch. It's not about logic, my friend. It's about feeling alive, pushing your limits, conquering your fears, experiencing the rush of adrenaline. For us humans, that's living. This explanation did little to satisfy the logician, whose circuits were practically smoking as it tried to compute the concept of illogical fun. As the lunch period was drawing to a close, a timid voice spoke up from the back of the crowd. It belonged to a fragolite, a species known for their delicate crystalline bodies and extreme caution. Jake, it said, its voice quavering slightly, is it true that humans engage in, it paused, as if struggling to even say the words, in pranks? The cafeteria fell silent once again. Even those aliens who had been fascinated by Jake's tales of human daring seemed unnerved by this new topic. Jake's grin widened, if that was even possible. Oh boy, have you opened a can of worms with that question? The Frigilite looked alarmed. Worms? I don't understand. Are worms involved in these pranks? Jake laughed. No, it's just an expression. But man, pranks, where do I even begin? Practical jokes, hoaxes, mischievous tricks, they're all part of human culture. Some are harmless fun. Others can be pretty elaborate. He launched into an explanation of various classic pranks, whoopee cushions, fake spiders, the old bucket of water over the door trick. With each example, the aliens' reactions ranged from bewilderment to outright horror. Oh, but why? Sputtered a hive-mind collective, its numerous bodies vibrating in confused unison. What purpose does deceiving and startling others serve? Jake shrugged. It's just for laughs, mostly. Humans love humor, even if it's sometimes at each other's expense. Plus, a good prank takes creativity, planning, and sometimes even teamwork. It's a way of bonding, believe it or not. The aliens exchanged worried glances. The idea that deception and startling others could be a form of social bonding was, well, alien to them. A telepathic symbiote, its two heads swiveling in opposite directions, spoke up. But surely such actions would damage trust between individuals. How can you form cohesive social units if you're constantly wary of being pranked? Jake chuckled. That's the beauty of it. It's all about knowing your audience, understanding boundaries, and being able to laugh at yourself too. A good prank brings people together, makes them laugh, and creates shared experiences. He could see that his explanation wasn't quite landing with his alien classmates. Their faces or equivalent sensory arrays were a mix of confusion, concern, and in some cases outright fear. Look, Jake said, his tone becoming a bit more serious. I know all this stuff about humans might seem crazy to you guys. We're loud, we're reckless, we do things that don't always make logical sense. But that's what makes us human. He stood up, looking around at the assembled aliens. We push boundaries, we take risks, we laugh in the face of danger, sometimes literally. And yeah, sometimes we mess up, but we learn, we adapt, and we keep going. A Chronos, a species known for their ability to perceive time non-linearly, spoke up. But why? What drives your species to such extremes? Jake smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. Curiosity. Adventure, the desire to see what's over the next hill, or on the next planet, or in the next galaxy. We're explorers at heart. Always have been, always will be. He gestured around the cafeteria. Look at where we are right now. A galactic academy filled with species from all corners of the universe. You know how humans reacted when we first learned we weren't alone in the cosmos. We celebrated. Then we started figuring out how to build ships to come meet you all. This statement caused a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Many species had reacted to first contact with fear or suspicion. The idea of actively seeking out unknown alien life was, well, very human. But it's not just about the big stuff, Jake continued. We bring that same spirit to everything we do. Whether it's eating spicy food, pulling pranks, playing sports, or studying Xenobiology, we throw ourselves into life with everything we've got. He grinned, that classic human expression that was equal parts friendly and slightly unnerving to his alien classmates. And you know what? I think that's why we fit in so well here at the Academy. Because at our core, humans are all about learning, growing, and experiencing new things. Even if we go about it in some pretty weird ways sometimes. As Jake finished speaking, a strange thing happened. The aliens in the cafeteria began to applaud. It wasn't the thunderous, unified applause you might hear at a human gathering. No, this was a cacophony of diverse sounds, tentacles slapping against gelatinous bodies, energy beings pulsating rapidly, crystalline entities vibrating at harmonic frequencies. But the sentiment was clear, they were impressed. Professor Zilblax, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the cafeteria, stepped forward. All 12 of his eyes were wide with what might have been excitement. It was always hard to tell with Venurians. Mr. Jake, he said, his monotone voice carrying just a hint of emotion, I believe you've just given the most comprehensive and enlightening lecture on human behavior that this academy has ever witnessed. Would you consider giving a formal presentation to the entire Xenobiology department? Jake blinked in surprise. Sure, I guess. As long as I don't have to write a paper on it. You know how we humans feel about unnecessary paperwork. This statement elicited a round of laughter from the assembled aliens. It seemed that bureaucratic hassles were indeed a universal constant. As the lunch period came to an end and students began filing out of the cafeteria, Jake found himself surrounded by a group of aliens. But unlike earlier in the day, They weren't keeping a fearful distance. Instead, they were peppering him with questions, their initial trepidation replaced by genuine curiosity. Can you teach us more about these pranks? What other extreme sports do humans engage in? Is it true that humans have contests to see who can eat the most food in one sitting? Jake laughed, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the chili pepper he'd eaten earlier. Tell you what, he said, why don't we start a human culture club? We can meet up, I'll tell you more about Earth, and maybe even demonstrate some human pastimes. Who knows, some of you might even want to try them out. The response was enthusiastic, if a bit nervous. As Jake watched his new alien friends chatter excitedly amongst themselves, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Sure, humans might be seen as the crazy Deathworlders of the galaxy, but they were also the life of the party. As he headed to his next class, Jake couldn't help but chuckle to himself. He'd come to the Galactic Academy to learn about alien life, but it turned out he had quite a bit to teach as well. And isn't that what humanity was all about? Learning, teaching, exploring, and occasionally scaring the living daylights out of unsuspecting alien species. Just another day in the life of a human at the Galactic Academy of Sciences and Arts. One thing was for sure, classes were about to get a whole lot more interesting.